The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. Jesus departed from there and came to his native place, accompanied by his disciples. When the Sabbath came, he began to teach in the synagogue, and many who heard him were astonished. They said, "Where did this man get all this? What kind of wisdom has been given him? What mighty deeds are wrought by his hands? Is he not the carpenter, the son of Mary, and the brother of James and Joses, and Judas and Simon? And are not his sisters here with us?" And they took offense at him. Jesus said to them, "A prophet is not without honor except in his native place, and among his own kin, and in his own house." So he was not able to perform any mighty deeds there, apart from curing a few sick people by laying hands on them. He was amazed at their lack of faith. The Gospel of the Lord. On November 1st of this last year, a great, perhaps saint, at least a great figure in the religious world of Africa, passed away. His name was Paride. He was the founding bishop of the Diocese of Torit, and he was the archbishop of that diocese, that archdiocese, for 21 years. And then after that, the Vatican gave him a second job, a job to be an ambassador, a diplomat. And he was able, by his persuasiveness, to make warring factions come to peace in Sudan, South Sudan, Rwanda, and in Darfur. He was also able to bring about relief missions, supplies for those who were moved out of their homes, who were refugees. The United Nations, I think it was in the year 1998, gave him their highest prize, the United Nations Peace Prize, because unlike so many people who had tried, he was successful in bringing peace and ending wars that had continued and simmered for generations. But the irony is that the first 5 or 6 years of his time as a priest were a disaster. In 1960, there was a civil war in Sudan, and he was part of the Mahdi tribe, which was a Christian tribe comprising only 1.5% of the population, a small minority, and they were being persecuted. They were being killed. And so he fled out of Sudan and went to Uganda, where he had a conversion experience, went to seminary, and became a priest, and was convinced that he had to go back to his homeland and be a priest there. There's only one problem. Uganda had African priests. Sudan had only experienced European missionaries. So this black man walks in and says, "I'm your pastor," and people were like, "No, I don't think so. You look like us. You speak our language. You dress like us. You're one of us. Priests are Europeans. They're white. They're exotic. They're different. Somebody who isn't different can't be holy. Somebody who isn't different can't lead us in the faith." And as a result of that, they were so convinced that he was a fraud that they actually drove him out of the parish. On threat of killing him, he had to leave. And that happened in 2 parishes, Palotaka and Simbaya. Both parishes thought, this man can't possibly be a priest. And to make matters worse, he was ordained in 1964, right at the end of Vatican II, so he was put in charge of facing the people rather than having his back to the people, and doing the Mass in the vernacular, in Arabic or in French. Priests don't speak Arabic. Priests speak Latin. You can't be a priest. And so for those first years, he was just never able to get across to the people that he was a priest, let alone get them to listen to what he had to say or follow him in any way, shape, or form. That is very similar to what we see in today's gospel. Jesus is the hometown boy. Probably there were some older people who could remember him when he was a toddler, struggling to stay upright, falling down. They knew him when he had skinned knees. Many of them probably remembered him as an awkward teenager, not necessarily all that smooth at that point, because he was only a kid. So how can one of us be that holy? He didn't go to a rabbinical school. He just spoke common sense. How can that be something exceptional? And so they rejected him. We hear that he couldn't do any miracles, any great works, not because he lacked the power, but because they lacked the receptivity to receive that power. They lacked the ability to receive what he had to offer. And so as a result of that, Jesus doesn't do any great miracles in his hometown. Hometown boys can't be that special. And yet, if we look at our saints, there is a consistent theme through our saints that says it is in the commonplace that we find holiness. St. Teresa of Lisieux wanted to be a missionary, wanted to travel around the world, ended up, because of her health issues, in a convent, never leaving that building for years. But she learned something. In her memoirs, she says, holiness does not consist of doing extraordinary things, but doing ordinary things in an extraordinary manner. Mother Teresa of Calcutta said, we can't all do big things, but we can do little things with great love. John Chrysostom said, faithfulness in little things is a big deal, a big thing. So we don't find holiness in the spectacular, in the exotic. We find holiness, we find God in the commonplace. So 30 seconds of heavy theology for you. We were created in the image of God. That means that divinity and humanity are compatible. That's why the divine Son of God could become human, because God created us in a way that we could be receptive to divinity. God created us in a way that we could apprehend the divine, but not by being less or different from who we are, but by being exactly who we are, because we are created in God's image. As St. Francis de Sales said, be who you are. Don't be anybody different, but make sure that being who you are, you do that very, very well. And so our charge is not to be different from whom we are. Our charge is not to be exotic, nor are we tasked with the idea of finding holiness in a faraway land or in a very, very different person, but just by being who we are and paying careful attention to make sure that we do that well. I'll give you an example. My sister and my brother-in-law, Joy and Bill, retired at the same time. And about 15 years ago, my sister said to me, you know, I never learned to drive, so Bill and I are always together. We go everywhere together. We are together morning, noon, and night. We are together day after day, week after week, month after month. And she said, God help me, he's driving me crazy. I love him to death, but he's driving me crazy. And so that is the front line between holiness and the lack thereof. What will she do? Will she focus on the things that are driving her crazy and become more irritated, more impatient, more disdainful of him? Or will she focus on his faithfulness to her, his help to her, his love of her? She has a choice to make, whether to choose to see the things that are negative and get more and more angry and irritated, or to choose the things that are lovable, that are holy, and become more and more appreciative. Each and every one of us in our own lives has that same question. Holiness, the battle line between goodness and badness, is not in some exotic place. It's at the kitchen table. My cousin Kathleen is here, and I know for a fact that I probably bugged the heck out of her. She loves me, but I know that I irritate her. And frankly, sometimes you irritate me too. That is what family is all about. Choosing to choose the good, the holy, the lovable. Holiness is not something that is exotic, that has to be in a different language or in a different place in the world. Holiness is right where we are, but we have to choose it, and we have to work at it, and we have to be mindful of it. And what we do matters. That is an important thing to remember from today's readings. What we do matters. We have a choice to make. Vatican II talks about the fact that all of us are called to be saints. I remember, some of you might remember Sister Jean. She was here many years ago, quite a few years ago, and there was one meeting that I had with her. It was an evaluation of her job, even though she was only kind of unofficially working here. And she said her primary goal was to be a saint. And when she said that to me, I was kind of startled. But then she reminded me, didn't Vatican II say that all of us are called to be saints? It's nothing special. All of us are called to be saints. All of us are called to move more and more toward holiness, to make choices that will make us saints. And she said, that's what my goal is. And that's what everybody's goal should be, to be saints. Now, I can tell you that to be saints doesn't mean to be perfect. We have in the second reading today, St. Paul talking about his thorn in the flesh. I am not a very detail-oriented person. I am not a very organized person. I am much more a dreamer who sometimes gets lost in my fantasies and doesn't really pay attention to the nitty-gritty of everyday life. My cousin Tommy used to call me Mr. Magoo because I was oblivious to some practical things in life. He also called me a space cadet. And that only got worse when I had a brain injury in '96 that caused me not to be so good with memory. People like my homilies. I'll tell you, you wouldn't like my homilies when I was first ordained because I had a good memory and I would just inundate you with details. But when I lost my memory, how could I preach? Stories. Stories are easy to remember. So I tell you stories now, and you tell me you like them. That isn't from my strength. That is from my weakness. And that is an important lesson that Paul tells us in today's second reading. Our holiness isn't necessarily from our stellar capabilities. Holiness sometimes comes from the fact that we recognize that we need other people. We need help. We need God. And that humility, that acceptance of our limitations will lead us toward a greater unity with others and a greater unity toward God. We don't have to be something unusual, exotic. We don't have to be anything different from ourselves. We just have to be who we are, and we need to do that well. Be who you are and do that well, and you will be a saint. And God will glory in the fact that you have finally gotten that lesson, and that I have finally gotten that lesson. We are all on that same journey together. So let us thank God for our blessings, never taking them for granted. And let us thank God for the fact that we are on the road to something special. Yes, ordinary, but also saintly.